Welcome to another episode of Behind the Shield podcast. I'm your host, Gary Daemer, and today I have a guest, Christian Baer, and we're going to talk briefly about some FedRAMP, the past of FedRAMP, the future of FedRAMP, and overall audits and cybersecurity controls within the federal market space. But with that said, Christian, can you give us a brief update of who you are, what you're about, and why you love what you do?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Gary, for having me. So, like Gary mentioned, my name is Christian Baer, and I am a technical fellow at Schellman. Schellman is an audit firm based in Tampa, Florida. So, we support a variety of different assessments against different frameworks and standards to include FedRAMP, CMMC, GovRAMP, but of course, things like SOC, ISO, PCI, HITRA. So, pretty much any framework or standard that requires a third-party assessment, Schellman can typically support that. So my specific role is on the federal team. So I spend a lot of time doing FedRAMP assessments, but also trying to refine our methodology, kind of explore new tooling that we could use, perform training. So those are some of the things that I do. And as far as kind of what drew me to FedRAMP. So before coming to Schellman, I used to be a federal contractor. I'm supporting a federal agency with all things FISMA. And so that's really where I cut my teeth on
Ah,
FISMA and the risk management framework, and really grew to appreciate the things that I thought, the good things about the risk management framework, and some of the not so good things, or some of the things that have kind of come under the crosshairs recently with FedRAMP, just some of the more manual parts of an assessment, or just the risk management framework in general. But I did recognize there was a lot of good things. I liked the way you categorize the information, how you implemented controls, assess against those controls based on your selected baseline, and you could add overlays and you could have unique parameters. So I thought there was actually a lot of flexibility built into it. But ultimately, what drew me to Schellman and what I really like about FedRAMP is I really felt like I could make a big impact if I were to find a vulnerability or weakness in a cloud service that's used across the federal government. It was a really good way to make a difference, make an impact. So I really do believe in the mission. I really do believe in the work that we do, and of course, I'm excited to see where things are headed. I'm also just trying to. Part of this is I just want to see that a reasonable approach is taken. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
not me, man. I want to see us be unreasonable and break things and move as fast as we can. Now, I'm only kidding. I really like FISMA or any the NIST documentation
Hmm.
standards, because it's a stick you can measure against, right?
Hmm.
We follow themes here as we build solutions. But at every path you get, you have something you can measure against, so you'll
Hmm.
know, if you're meeting the cybersecurity requirements for that level of business impact on the data, right?
Hmm.
So that's one of the things I really truly do love about it. But I think over the years, it's gotten to be very cumbersome, right? And
Hmm.
I think we've taken it, every step we go one more space, further in really bogging down the way we can do things. And I think we're also dragging all the baggage along with us from the
Hmm.
days of the data center and the days that the government owned the systems. Right
Hmm.
today, we're moving a lot more a lot faster today, and we're using more cloud solutions. So many things, that we work on, in my opinion here, right, is really in the cloud,
Hmm.
and it has metadata on it, and you can easily, kind of address that or ask that thing, that service that's in the cloud, how it's
Hmm.
configured, what kind of vulnerabilities that are on it. So, getting to that step of being able to peek under the hood of the services, I think is so much easier today from a CSP perspective,
Hmm.
and and we got to get the same place, in my opinion, on the audit side. So, pushing real hard to drive more command line interfaces, more automations to be able to get that data back. Yep. What is your opinion, kind of, on the space that you see today and how fast it's moving?
Yeah, it's been interesting. It's like you said, there's been a lot of change here over the course of the last year, in FedRAMP and beyond, really, where I've just now I'm starting to see some discussions around ways to kind of modernize in other areas like PCI as an example. We're kind of opening things up to additional opportunities for automation, and so I guess where I'm at. So obviously, I've done a lot of assessments over the years. I think sometimes assessors do get a little bit of a bad rap, and for the whole accepting screenshots thing, only because sometimes that's really what our As an example, I used to work for an organization we were required to take screenshots that included the date and time, the component where the screenshot was taken from. So we didn't have the ability to accept command line output. So that's something that unfortunately, as an assessor, we were our hands were tied.
No, no, I
Um,
get that. I totally get that, and it's actually a really good point that people need to understand.
mhm,
It wasn't the auditors that said, "Hey, this is the best way to do this." It was really the people that you were collecting that information for. So when
mhm,
they reviewed it, they could actually see that, and that's what they understood was the actual screenshot. And like you said, from where it was at, the date and
mhm.
time, and all that as well.
Right.
So that requirements traceability was all the way through, just like
Mhm.
you would do evidence, forensics analysis or something like that.
Right.
So,
Right.
so
So yeah, you may have an approved methodology that you have to follow, but I am excited that it does seem like I've heard people refer to this as Pandora's box has been opened, and it seems like this is a really big shift for our just the entire I guess GRC space. One thing in the last couple of days, just as one does, I was perusing NIST documents, but it was kind of funny. I actually found there was a NIST IR from 2017 that was all about automation and automated assessment, which I thought was really interesting. And it was talking about how obviously in 853 you have different assessment methods that you could use, and NIST doesn't prescribe those. It's really because NIST doesn't know what how you're using
right.
853.
Hmm.
But so there's obviously examine, interview, and test, and so it noted that anywhere there's a test step, that's usually an opportunity for some type of automation or automated validation. And it was saying that controls should only be automated if you can match the frequency that you would have been able to achieve through manual means, and also the completeness.
Right.
So that's something I've been thinking about a lot, is just the not so much the frequency, but more so the completeness. So I know one example I've been thinking about is, and I think this may have even come up on your previous episode with Tim from AWS, but talking about something like S3 buckets. I think it's just a good
Hmm.
easy example. So if as an assessor you show me a policy that says that all S3 buckets must be encrypted at rest, that's a great start and a great foundation. But then as an assessor, I started thinking, well, what about the buckets that were created before that policy was put into place? So that's where I think there is some nuance here, and that as assessors, I think we of course we want to come to the table and with industry and find the most reasonable ways to assess against requirements. We don't want to slow things down or be the reason that the assessment takes so long or so burdensome. But those are just some of the things that I think about when it comes to automation, is just ensuring that you are getting the full picture. So are you seeing all the applicable resources?
And I know we've been talking about this for the last several weeks and several
Mhm,
podcasts. Is with our design that we have, it's an opinionated design. It's
mhm,
pretty much built the exact same way every single time with some
mhm,
nuance differences. And we have a good inventory module, so it'll tell you all the S3 buckets in the environment. And if
mhm,
that S3 bucket was created before the policy was put in place, then that policy should be enforced on that S3
mhm.
bucket that was there previously. So
Right.
we'll be able to check that anywhere in the environment that we create, because we have a multi-account
Mhm,
solution that we do, and we'll be able to check every one of the accounts for every one of the S3 buckets that we have, and then we'll
mhm,
flag any of them that doesn't meet the requirements. We do have at least one S3 bucket that don't meet all the requirements because
mhm.
of the technical requirements for what it's doing, right? But that's
Right.
documented
Yep.
in the process. So we can do both things at one time. Right? We can look and check to see the inventory just like that, because
Mhm,
it's generated on the fly. It's there. It's always there. And then we can check all those those controls on that specific S3 bucket or all the S3 buckets and say all these um, pass the pass the test. Matter of fact, if
Mm-hmm.
you look at our FedRAMP 20X stuff, I think we're at 97%. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason why we're at 97% because we have one S3 bucket that fails, but
Mm-hmm.
it meets the requirements for what it's supposed to do.
Right.
So, but in our eyes, it's an exception, and we haven't. I don't think we really have figured out yet how to deal with exceptions in this process yet. So
Right.
exceptions are going to be a neat thing for us to figure.
Yeah.
And we could do that same thing with EC2s or
Mm-hmm.
any other service within AWS, as long as we
Mm-hmm.
can query the information about it. And there's a lot of information you can get um, from those services inside of AWS.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, and just in the last couple of days, I was talking to a friend, and he was interested in the GRC field or IT audit, and I was explaining some of the kind of what's going on with FedRAMP, some of the shift, and he was telling me how he used to work for an organization where they would get their annual health inspection, and how his coworkers would be cleaning everything up right before the inspection. So we were talking about the difference in kind of like a point in time assessment versus
yep.
this
Hmm.
persistent validation. So as an assessor, I certainly appreciate that you can get better assurance through a more persistent approach, not just that point in time assessment. So certainly recognize that. And I've also been kind of thinking about, and this came up recently in another discussion, but the need to get more real time data across the federal government. That is nothing new. I mean, we saw the CDM program from DHS was a
Yes.
big
Hmm.
push for that, and actually that you mentioning exceptions kind of had me thinking about that, because I think one of the challenges of that program is every agency was providing sort of this raw scan data, raw vulnerability and compliance data, and there wasn't really that opportunity to you know to to analyze what was found and what's the context. What is this? Where is this in the environment? Is this truly a high risk finding? Is this on a internet facing asset? So I think that's some of the things when it comes to automation that we'll have to work through, is how do you ensure that with any automated tool or output, how do you ensure that you're getting the full picture and the full story, and that context is provided.
To me, you know, that that continuous capability is going to speak volumes for how secure the environments are, right?
Hmm.
If you can demonstrate that you're 97%, compliant month after month after month after month,
Hmm.
and you're not making any changes to your environment, I think that is going to be able to give a lot more confidence in the security of systems. I
Hmm.
think in some cases, though, and this is why I really do like the KSI model as well,
Hmm.
is that I think some people want to see all the detail of everything. And to me,
Yeah.
if you want to see all the detail of everything, that means you're looking at nothing, right?
Right.
Because you don't have the time to be able to examine all that stuff. If you don't have the
Hmm.
time to examine all that stuff, then what's the use of collecting it? Unless you
Right.
can put machine rules on that, and that raises that thing to the top, right? For
Hmm.
people to look at. Let me ignore 99% of this stuff, and let me focus on this one thing. Now, there's different levels for
Hmm.
CSPs. There's another level for the agency. There might be another level for government wide,
Hmm.
perspectives, or an AO inside of an agency, and then maybe an
Hmm.
agency overall. And then maybe all I really want to see is, I don't care about the individual vulnerabilities that's in your system. I shouldn't have to care
Right.
as an AO. That's your responsibility. You're accountable for that. So
Hmm.
we need to hold those people accountable for that.
Yeah.
So there needs to be some definitions, because I think the CDM project, maybe it tried to get too much detail in
Right.
the one bucket,
Yeah.
because that was all they could see. And
Yeah.
I like the way that, again, the KSIs, and I like the way that they're
Hmm.
approaching the vulnerability management as
Hmm.
well, in the 20X stuff, where
Yeah.
they're putting additional categories. It's like when I first started looking at this, oh my God, I got a whole new math problem I got to figure out.
Hmm.
And I started doing the math and all this, and then one of the guys tapped me on the shoulder and said, it's more of an if statement. If
Right.
this, then this,
Yeah.
then this. It's not a big, complete, long math statement. It's a
Right.
couple. Let me do this check. Is it connected to the internet? What's the score? Is it known exploitable? it makes it a lot easier for us to then say, I have 5 vulnerabilities that's connected to the internet, and one of those is a known it's being exploited out
Mhm.
in the wild, right?
Yeah.
So it's easier to get to the real risk, to the real heart of the problem. And I think when we try to see too much, I
Mhm.
think then what it does is it just makes all the risk kind of equivalent, and that's not always the case. If
Yeah.
I have a database that nobody can get to, right?
Mhm.
In order for me to get to it, I have to remove security to get to it.
Mhm.
What are we really doing there, right?
Right.
Um, and I think that's a very good approach for the vulnerability management piece as well.
Mhm.
I don't have a lot of arguments against that. We do a lot of vulnerability management for our customers
Mhm.
today, and in some cases, the number of vulnerabilities continue to add up
Right.
every single month, and sometimes it's hard to manage them all.
Mhm.
And that's why you got to categorize them, and it's not
Yeah.
just a high, moderate, and low, but where is it in the environment? I think is a very very big. And yes, we've always been able to do tailoring, and we've always been able
Mhm.
to do you know, but then it's a mathematics for each vulnerability that way as well.
Gary, you bring up a good point. So one thing that Pete Waterman mentioned recently was the federal government. It's almost like the most complicated enterprise that you could ever imagine, where every agency is very different in their mission, their business processes, and their risk appetite. So as far as ensuring agencies have the data they need to make risk informed decisions, I can see why that's so challenging. And what I've heard over the years is that the CIO Council have tried to get on the same page as far as what would be a good baseline level of security, and they've just never been able to come to a consensus. Which I think that's part of the challenge of FedRAMP is you're talking about sharing authorization materials and writing off of another agency's ATO. There's just so much nuance in how agencies are using these cloud services. So I think that is one challenging area that I certainly don't have a good solution for, but something I'm tracking.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a really good answer for that either. But moderate data is moderate data,
Hmm.
and security controls are security controls. And if you can prove that you're doing it to meet those requirements, then we got to figure out how to move those things along faster. And I
Hmm.
think the way we do that is with more assurance, that
Hmm.
you really are meeting the mark. And I think that's why this automation aspect and being able to keep a good score going on is a good thing
Hmm.
for the federal government. Now, is everybody going to accept it? Probably not.
Hmm.
But will quite a few of them accept it? I hope so. Right.
Yeah.
Um, I know we're investing a ton into this to bring good solid products, to the government,
Hmm.
and also to other CSPs in order to be able to deliver um, this new 20X process. So,
Hmm.
I personally, I'm thoroughly excited about it.
Yeah.
But we still have to live in the real world today, right? Which is,
Hmm.
you know, which is always a challenge. We did a demo yesterday for a potential customer, and we were showing Red 5 things, and we were showing 20X things, and we were showing
Hmm.
DoD things.
Yep.
It's going to get real complicated for us in the near future. When I mean us, I mean you guys, us,
Yeah.
and how we actually kind of can support these customers.
Yep.
I think I saw on LinkedIn as well was somebody was talking about reciprocity,
Hmm.
and is 20X gonna damage the reciprocity? I would argue that I'm not sure the reciprocity has really ever been there, because if you go
Yeah.
to the DoD, you have to get IL4 or IL5
Right.
in order to really truly operate within the
Hmm.
DoD. Yeah, you can get an IL2, but what does that really do for you in that space?
Yeah.
So, how do you feel about trying to juggle Rev 5, and the DoD SRG,
Hmm.
and the FedRAMP 20X all at the same time?
Yeah, I've been seeing the same kind of sentiment where there are folks that are a little concerned with if 20x takes off and it is a divergence from 853 row 5 that it'll make it's additional something new that CSPs will have to implement. So whereas previously they could at least sort of build off their FedRAMP authorization to meet some of the other DoD requirements, via FedRAMP Plus or whether it's GovRAMP. So I think that, yeah, I do recognize that that is going to be a challenge. I know I've been hearing for a long time that, in various executive orders, that FedRAMP needs to explore reciprocity with other frameworks. And I know sort of the kind of the stock response I've heard over the years, just that, there's nothing like FedRAMP, that, FedRAMP is just very different from other frameworks or standards. So it's hard to kind of have reciprocity with other frameworks or standards. So yeah, I mean, as an assessor, I don't like having to assess controls where I know that that organization just went through the same thing for a similar framework of standards, or whether it be access controls or audit. I certainly recognize there's a lot of commonalities across many of these frameworks and standards. But yeah, for I guess specific to 20X and Rev 5, it's something we're definitely interested to see. Where 20X goes. The 20X assessments are very different, obviously,
Right.
than a traditional Rev 5 assessment. So obviously, the Rev 5 assessment takes a lot longer. There's a lot more documentation. Whereas the 20X assessments, I mean, I know you all have been through
Right.
them as
Mhm.
well. It's a lot more streamlined. It's a lot more, I would say, collaborative, where you're sort of stepping the assessor through how you've implemented each KSI, what's the logic behind it. So it is very different, but I certainly sympathize with CSPs who are concerned that 20X is a divergence from 853 Rev 5, and of course the DoD has not made any statements on any type of accepting any type of reciprocity with 20X to date. So certainly interested to see what happens.
And I'm not sure they would yet, right? Because
Mhm.
I mean, it's still a pilot, right?
Yeah, pilot.
We're still trying to kind of work our way through exactly how to deliver it.
Mhm.
So that does make sense. Although
Yeah.
it'd be nice for them to weigh in, because I would say probably half of our customers nowadays, want to sell into the civil market, and they want to sell into the DoD market, and
Mhm.
it's going to create some complications, not only from an audit perspective, but from a day to day maintenance side. From a
Mhm.
Kanban perspective, a POAM perspective, and then also from a vulnerability management perspective, because there's some
Yeah.
differences, between those requirements as well, those operational controls
Mhm.
as well. And to really run these things successfully, operations is key, right?
Mhm.
Building is great. And I love building them every single day, but operating them is even more fun. And it's going to
Yeah.
get more exciting as we are delivering to DoD and the civil sector at the same time,
Mhm.
for our customers,
Mhm.
because the requirements are slightly going to be slightly different when you need to remediate certain vulnerabilities and stuff
Mhm.
like that as well. But there's always been a struggle that between STIGs and CIS, or
Mhm.
configuration guides from a vendor. So how do
Mhm.
you see the operational piece kind of laying out as well? Can you envision anything there from an audit perspective
Yeah.
for
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the vision is that assessors are not just going to be, dropping in once, a cloud offering or product is fully operational and built. It's, the idea is that, that security is built in, really in the design phase and early
right?
on. So I do like that concept. I think that makes sense. I think the role of the assessor is obviously, if 20X does take off, the role of the assessor will change quite a bit. So instead of us, coming in once a year and, reviewing all of the various security controls, it's, more of a looking to see that you do have these persistent validations, that they are, they're complete, they're pulling the right information, you have the right coverage, they're accurate. So yeah, it is interesting. So I think from an operations perspective, I think my impression is that, yeah, the vision is that, well, I guess I could say this. So as someone who's been an assessor and an auditor for most of my career, I know that in most organizations, people run the other way when they see you coming, and
Right.
people tend it to be very guarded, which, uh, you know, sometimes you're looked at as the enemy. And you're like, hey, I'm here to, I'm here to help. But so kind of what I'm envisioning is that, the assessor might be looked at maybe in a different light, where if the assessors are kind of understand how the controls are baked in from the beginning, that I know one kind of the big 20X themes is kind of that transparency. So you're trying to be very open about how you've implemented certain capabilities. So what I'm hoping that does change some of the some of the well, kind of what assessors or auditors get, just being the enemy, or people want to run the other way or try to pull the wool over our eyes. But really just helping us understand how these controls are implemented. That's something I've tried
You
to
mean
do.
this never worked? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, yeah,
These are not the controls you're looking for?
exactly. I've always tried to really meet people in the middle. I do have an IT background, so that's kind of helped me as an assessor. Where I recognize you talk to developers, you talk to sysadmins, you might talk to FSOs or people that are on the physical security side of the house. So that's what I'm hoping is, with something like 20X, we can all, speak a similar language and kind of get on the same page. So there's not so much mystery about, what would an assessor want to see, or how do we expect something to be implemented. So that's what I'm hoping.
That's a very, 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 very good point. Um, some of our claim to fame of what we've done over the years is one of the reasons why people hired us is because we've been through a lot of assessments, so we know
Mhm.
how to, kind of march people all the way through that process.
Yeah.
And in some ways, this open transparency is going to kind of remove those Sherpas, all right, or the
Hmm.
requirement for the Sherpas. I think in the beginning we're still going to need some of them, right? But maybe as time goes on, you might not need them as much because people are publishing things publicly, so you can
Hmm.
see exactly how they're measuring what that against that measuring stick. So that transparency also not only goes from an audit perspective, but from a build perspective, and then from an operations perspective as well. So it does
Hmm.
make it a little more approachable. That's the reason why we love what we do. Is we want to get people to where they want to go faster,
Hmm.
a less expensive in a less expensive way. And
Hmm.
we are very transparent about how we talk to people about what the process is, and then also about what technologies you need, and then
Hmm.
how you actually can meet those requirements without removing anything from a security perspective. To me,
Hmm.
security is job number one. I've been doing cybersecurity for over 40 years, and to me that's the most vital way. How I actually prove I do what I did, that's important as well. But making
Hmm.
sure it's secure first is very important. But
Yeah.
having those automated checks, it's going to be a lot easier to see what people are doing to validate that they're doing what they said they're doing.
Hmm.
um,
Exactly.
Even customers are going to be able to see it as well, so the customers of the CSP. So
Hmm.
but
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, that's one of the biggest themes, or I guess biggest pieces of feedback or criticism I've heard over the years about FedRAMP is just exactly like you stated, that if you haven't been through this process a number of times, there's a lot of things that just weren't well documented, or maybe it lived in an email, or it was something that somebody
right.
told
Oh,
you
I've gotten
verbally.
that. I've gotten that. Oh, so I got this email from 3 years ago
Yeah,
that says if this then that.
right.
And I'm thinking to myself, oh, man, that person's no
Yeah,
longer even that's not even there. Is that same philosophy still there? Yes,
exactly.
let's figure out how to get past that. And
Right.
I'm hoping with this the new FedRAMP 20X, it's really going to take us to that more transparent,
Hmm.
prescriptive models. Now,
Yes.
is it going to be the panacea? No, it's not going to be perfect.
Right.
Nothing's going to be perfect. You're going to have to work things out. But
Yeah.
more transparency is better than none. So
Yeah, and I really do think that CSPs would, and I know 3PAOs would love to see more implementation examples. It really does help you understand, okay, what is the control or KSI, and then what's the intent behind it, and then if you're able to provide implementation examples or reference architectures, it goes a really long way, because I know a lot of there's different interpretations, and I know at least for 20X, Pete has mentioned that really is the intent, that it was vague by design, because the PMO really wanted to see what ideas people came up with, and he really felt like people would kind of lean into it, and really what they would want to show all of the great things they're already doing to secure their, even if it's on the commercial side, just things that they're doing to secure their their product, or their environment, to kind of really give them credit, and give them a mechanism to really showcase all the things that they're doing. So but like you said earlier on, standardization, and having some sort of benchmark to measure yourself against. That's obviously important, because that's really what compliance is all about, is kind of showing your work, kind of showing, proving that you can say you're secure, but can you prove it? And what's the benchmark you're being measured against? So
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Doug, Schellman. I think he's the president
mhm,
of Schellman.
yeah,
He put up a really cool image the other day. We need to turn compliance into helmets and not
mhm,
handcuffs. I've
right,
actually written a blog about it, and I haven't actually published it yet, but I'll get it out probably soon. And that's the
hmm
way we need to be able to look at this stuff, right? It really
hmm
needs to be more of protective gear
yeah,
than you can't do this because this is what the precedents, this is what the case law says,
yeah,
about that.
yep,
What makes it less secure by doing it this way? Help me
hmm
understand that. You know,
yeah.
just
Actually,
because you think that technology helps, does it really help do what you
right.
think it does? And I think that's where we've been, for a long time. People have added a lot of tools, a lot of complexity,
hmm
into their environments because they had a tool that did this, and they had a tool
Yeah.
that did that, and a tool that did this. But does it actually add value? Does it add security layers to
hmm
what you're doing?
Yeah.
We're big on cloud native, so if we can leverage a cloud native tool and then build on top of that cloud native tool, I think it
hmm
gets our customers where they need to go a lot faster and a lot less expensive. Because
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever managed licenses before. They
hmm
can get they can get painful.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
If you have
Yeah.
5 or 6, 7 or 8, 9 different tools doing cybersecurity in your environment, and you got to manage the life cycle of those licenses, it doesn't get to be painful
Yeah.
over time. So,
Yeah. And those tools can be weaponized. We've
oh
seen it
yeah,
time
yeah,
and time again where you have an EDR solution and it gets compromised, and yeah, that's it's another whole other fun aspect of security.
yeah,
But it's funny though, you mentioned just that blog post that you mentioned from Doug. But so I was literally thinking about it today, about how I was wondering if the reason why the FedRAMP PMO kind of decided to shift gears from controls to KSIs is just because of that, almost that negative connotation of the word control. It feels very restrictive. It's like they're defining what you're not able to do, or sort of how you're supposed to do it. So that I was having that thought actually today. Of I wonder if that was kind of trying to change the messaging a little bit.
Well, I think the commercial world has gone to key performance indicators,
hmm
key, indicators. Whatever
Yeah.
you put a middle acronym or a middle word in there, and that's kind of where they're, that's kind of the direction we've been going for a long time in the overall, commercial technology environment. And you even think about how they've been doing statements of work over time. The
hmm
statements of objectives. Let me give you the objectives of what we want to cover, and I think you
hmm
can get a lot better, clearer, concise solution sets that meet your needs as a cloud service provider, as opposed to you're building something in or you're hammering
Right.
something in that just doesn't quite fit. It doesn't meet all the requirements.
Yeah.
And just because you got to add that in, now it actually makes additional vulnerabilities in your environment because you just got
Right.
one more thing you have to manage.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I know I've seen this numerous times in my career where a contract might say, must meet FISMA requirements, just these broad statements. And if you're a vendor or CSP, and this is maybe your first foray into federal government or federal IT security, you would have no idea what that means, and it's
right,
extremely hard to retroactively apply requirements. So if we've all heard the analogy of, it's like trying to, like you forget to add salt to a birthday cake, and you try to add it at the end, and
it
you
doesn't
can't. It
work.
has to be baked in from the beginning. So I think that's where, yeah, if you can, if the requirements are known, and like, let's say your development team has the requirements up front, they understand them, they can build them in from the beginning, but you're going to have a much better success than if you build the product, and now it's assessment time, and here's all of these requirements that members of the team may have never even heard of or weren't aware of. That's obvious. That's friction. So that's where I hope we can kind of get on the same page, as an industry, with sort of what the expectations are, how to go about implementing controls or KSIs, and what's a reasonable approach for validating that they're truly in place.
But for me, and I think I probably could speak for most of the folks who work for the company. We we
Mhm.
we we go up through about 20 audits a year, 20 plus
Yep.
audits a year, because we manage so many different environments. So, and we've seen every flavor of every company who does audits.
Hmm.
I've never really worried about it, right? From an
Hmm.
audit perspective. I won't lie that every time we go through an audit, somebody sees something new because they have a new
Right.
team member or
Right.
a different guy or gal who's in there the assessment, asking a different
Hmm.
question about something that we've not thought about in that
Right.
way. But for the most part, I'm not really worried about the auditors. I think you guys have done a really good job, even in the current environments.
Hmm.
I can't speak for everybody, right?
Hmm.
But for a lot of our customers, we tend not to have much issues with auditors. Matter of fact, many auditors finish early when we're on that side,
Yeah.
because we have all the evidence already uploaded for you guys, and we know exactly where to point you to,
Hmm.
in the environments.
Yeah.
So I've had nothing but respect for the majority of the auditing industry. Now,
Hmm.
I can't speak as much on, say, some of the other certification processes,
Hmm.
some of the ISO things or some of the other ones are
Yeah.
maybe not as strong
Right.
as FedRAMP. And I think that's one of the reasons why, though, because it is a very strong standard. It
Hmm.
requires strong, assessors to come in and be have a lot of knowledge, in other words, right, in the
Yeah.
environment. So,
Yeah. We just had a internal training with Karen Scarfoni from she's co-written. Yeah, it sounds like you maybe know her. She's
I
written
know her
so
very
many.
well. Karen and I go way back.
Yeah,
Her and I
but
worked
she was
together at Booz
awesome.
Allen.
we,
So,
we were we were talking about how the role of the assessor is changing, and she said, "Oh, I can remember when NIST they came up with a hardening checklist for Windows XP, and so maybe as an assessor, you're just going through that checklist, and she was just acknowledging that now it's so complex with." Maybe you're deployed in a cloud environment, but you're managing all this infrastructure. Maybe you're a multi-cloud system where now you're having to you secure resources across multiple clouds. You've got infrastructure, maybe some components on premise. So it's not only hard for those on the side of the house of implementing these security controls, but also as an assessor, just to ensure that you're capturing everything. You actually understand the architecture, the data flows.
and you guys have to learn it. You guys have to learn it like that too, right? I mean, very fast, and get in and hit the ground running, and then be able to ask the questions pretty rapidly. So I know
Yeah.
it's a challenge, and for us from an engineering perspective, we're always trying to build, to meet those requirements.
Hmm.
Um, we don't always get everywhere we need to get to, but being able to explain the story and the storyline, I think, helps as well.
Hmm.
Why do we do this? Why do we do that? And if you look at the four layers that are in front of you, maybe that requirement doesn't mean what it means here, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. Let me switch topics a little bit here.
Hmm.
I wouldn't mind just briefly talking about CMMC,
Hmm.
and DFARS, and how do you see that playing out, in this space, from a FedRAMP, CS. Let's keep it tied to the FedRAMP if you don't mind, because
Hmm.
that's a whole another ball of wax. I'm not sure I want to get into today
Yeah.
from a CMMC perspective. But how do you see that playing out in this space with the CSPs and FedRAMP, the FedRAMP equivalency,
Hmm.
how do we see that playing with the 20X stuff? You know, uh, any predictions there, or anything you want to step out on a limb with?
Yeah, it kind of came on my radar. I want to say maybe it was like 2018 or 2019. I started hearing about CMMC, and so
Right.
as an assessor, I definitely was saying, this sounds interesting. I didn't know anything about it, but so when I joined Schellman, I started getting involved with our CMMC team, and so yeah, it's been very interesting. It does have some parallels or overlap with FedRAMP, but at the same time it's very different from FedRAMP. So that's been just a personal challenge. Is when you're having a conversation in the context of CMMC or FedRAMP, you have to be careful because there's nuance with each, and so it's like you almost have to put different hats on to approach things from different perspectives. As far as how I see things playing out, I mean, I know obviously there was the requirement that if your cloud service was storing, processing, or transmitting CUI, that you had to either achieve a FedRAMP moderate authorization or FedRAMP moderate equivalency, which that's a challenge in its own. Um,
Right.
so as far as kind of where I see things headed, it's hard to say. I have been watching what's coming out of DoD CIO with Swift, where
Right.
the Katie Arrington wants to blow up the RMF, and so I feel like if that takes off, then I feel like there could be some changes to CMMC. I mean, that would be, I think, I guess a reasonable prediction. I don't know if that's a spicy prediction, but I could see that, especially also if 20X takes off, that the DoD or DOW would sort of reevaluate its approach and its requirements. And, because I think everybody does want to get faster. Everybody wants to, move quicker. Our adversaries are moving quick. We can't, we don't have the ability to really have these long drawn out assessments. So I think that's something everyone's acknowledged. So really, one thing I've tried to do is just kind of think like an attacker and think, that sort of helped me, whether it's CMMC or FedRAMP, just kind of
Right.
helping to understand the level of risk and sort of how to approach certain requirements.
But I think you would agree with this, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'll say it boldly. Most of the backup has not really been, because we need to get a FedRAMP moderate audit, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can get them scheduled in, I don't know, 5, 6 weeks, 7 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
depending on how complicated the system is. We can
Mm-hmm.
be done with that. It's painful and it costs a lot, but
Yeah.
that's not where the holdup is, right? The holdup really is once you get done and you get into the queue and then you go through
Mm-hmm.
the review process, within Department of Defense, um,
Mm-hmm.
or on the civil side. Now, fortunately, on the civil side, they have sped that up even on the Rev 5, so that's really helped
Mm-hmm.
tremendously on the
Yeah.
civil side. But
Mm-hmm.
it seems to be, very similar. I've got to get these people involved. I got to get these people involved. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to do this. So
Mm-hmm.
it is a fairly long, drawn out process,
Yeah.
to get people certified in that. And there's nothing we can do about that, right? I
Yeah.
mean, maybe complain a little bit to
Yeah.
people. I don't. So,
Well, I've heard that different agencies and the DoD or DOW, that I can't get used to that. They have their own maybe unique requirements or their own kind of unique processes. So that's been one of the challenges even within DoD is just kind of exploring reciprocity, because different agencies have different approaches, different templates or different methodology that they require. So that's the same challenges we're seeing in FedRAMP, where it's really very similar in that agencies have their own unique requirements, their own mission. So just something I think as an industry we're seeing is how do we work through this? I think everybody would love to see some more harmonization, and just people kind of getting on the same page with how best to approach assessment. But yeah, it sounds like there's even a lot of difficulty within DoD itself.
yeah, here again, I don't see it as the assessment issue. I really
Mhm.
don't. I see it as the review of the assessments, right?
Mhm.
And the amount of time that takes. So,
Yeah,
uh, and I don't know how we get through that, right? I mean, I
yeah.
just don't know how we get through that.
I heard,
Um,
so at one of those, I know I bumped into you at the Cloud ATO conference, and I do
yep.
remember the one from the prior year, which was very OSCAL focused, which we know we haven't heard as much about OSCAL these days. But one thing I thought was really interesting,
Oh, thank
it was the gentleman from RegScale. I don't recall his name, but he was saying
God.
that
Yeah, yeah,
you could define your risk tolerance as code, so that when it came time to do your review, that you would only, just like we talked about earlier, you would only see anything that went above your risk threshold or risk tolerance. I thought that was a really cool way of looking at things, and I would love to see that take off, where if an AO could actually define as code what would be of concern to them. I think, as we all know, that's kind of one of the biggest missing voices for 20X right now, is just agencies, and which
correct.
I know Pete's acknowledged that's not part of the pilot. That his plan is that'll come later. The agency adoption will come later, but I think that would be a
I
really
hope
cool
sooner than
approach.
later because ultimately we all want to make money at this, right? So you got to have agencies and or companies, willing
Hmm.
to put some money into it to make the ecosystem go around. I mean, as much as you hate to say it, there is an ecosystem here, and
Yeah.
that ecosystem thrives on delivering services to either the government or other CSPs. And
Yeah.
so we've got to be able to, without a lot of pain and suffering,
Hmm.
all be able to make some cash flow.
Yeah. And my theory, so the FedRAMP modernization memo, which came out in 2024, said that, by 2026, agencies had to have tooling that could support OSCAL or any,
Right.
not OSCAL, like whatever the next machine
Yeah.
readable format is. And so that's sort of my theory, is that's why 20X low was sort of geared towards GRC tool providers, so that it would get those GRC tools into the hands of agencies to kind of build out that ecosystem. So
Mm-hmm.
whether or not that's true, that's just what I kind of my hunch.
I think that's 100% accurate, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, and let's go away from FedRAMP for just a second. Think about the
Mhm.
internal issues that these government organizations have.
Mhm.
I mean, how many ATOs does an agency have internally? How many FISMA ATOs do they have?
Thousands.
And then how much money is being spent on maintaining those ATOs as well?
Mhm.
And that's just maintaining those ATOs. That's not really. Does that really? How much are they getting? A lot of return on the investment
Right.
from a ATO perspective, ATO management perspective,
Mhm.
for pure security. And are you protecting your data that much better because you are spending, I don't know, millions of dollars probably in managing those
Mhm.
ATOs? And
Right.
I mean, how many man hours are also being being put against that? And if you can put some automation in there, figure out some new standards for streamlining those processes. Going back to the same thing, do you really need all that data?
Mhm.
To be able to make those decisions, and can those decisions be pushed down
Right.
a little bit further? Now, I don't
Yeah.
understand all the law behind everything, so
Yeah.
most likely the answer is no until
Well,
they change some laws.
yeah. I have had people when I used to kind of be more in the FISMA space and come up and ask me, well, what would happen if we didn't do these things, if we didn't meet our obligations under FISMA? And you've never really seen um, much with teeth when it comes to FISMA.
Right.
But yeah, to your point, yeah, I think agencies are probably feeling very overwhelmed, with the just kind of keeping up with all of the continuous monitoring requirements. So I feel like most agencies would be open to kind of like rethinking the process. And I think there's a lot of, I think, really cool ideas that are getting floated out there. And I do think 20X does have some good, I think parts of 20X are really interesting. And I think no matter what happens, I think the cat is out of the bag, and things will likely change.
Yeah, that's what we can hope for. So,
Hmm.
so with that, how about any questions for me? Have anything for me that you want to ask me? So
Um, so I guess from your perspective, what part of 20X are you the most excited about, or what, I guess, is there a certain aspect that interests you the most?
I I think it's the ability to truly see the security posture of your system with a blink of an eye.
Hmm.
Right? You can look right at it and you can see it. And I hate to say red, yellow, green. But right there you can see the security posture of your system,
Yep.
whether it's the vulnerabilities, whether it's the the controls, the KSIs that you have configured, but right
Hmm.
there, and then to me, I like to do a little more vision casting. I can push a little
Hmm.
bit further, is to be able to then take all that information from my CSP or my application, right, and then I can also then have all of them, all the ones that we manage. Say I manage 50 of them at a agency. I can look all
Hmm.
across my entire portfolio, and I
Right.
can see the red,
Hmm.
yellow, green perspectives. So then I can say, okay, these are the ones I need to be focused on. I can focus my
Hmm.
attention on these guys. I need to reach out to them and ask them what's going on.
Hmm.
Right? To me, if you follow that thread, that to me is the best capability, because I
Hmm.
think sometimes security kills ourselves because we get to be too complex sometimes,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
especially in this side of the house. I'm not saying we please, that's not what I'm saying. We do not shortchange anything that we're putting in place, right? That
Yeah.
it's all still there, and it's done very well. It really is the how do we report on it? How do we
Hmm.
show that we're really doing the job that we're doing it? And I think we need to be able to do that as quickly as fast as possible, so we can make decisions to know where we need to focus our attention. Because
Hmm.
dollars are not ever infinitely expandable, right? And
Hmm.
people's time is not infinitely expandable. So we need to be able to focus where our attention needs to be at that present moment.
Yeah. One thing that I really liked that FedRAMP did previously was that whole that threat-based methodology where they scored the controls against their effectiveness against tools and techniques or and from MITRE attack.
Yeah, yeah,
I thought that
matter
was
attack framework. Yep.
yeah, I thought that was a really cool approach, and yeah, 'cause, just as somebody who, like I said at the beginning, I do believe in FedRAMP. I want to see that the controls or KSIs, whatever they may be, they do add value. It's not just compliance for compliance sake. And I do like to think like an attacker, and I think that's really our best approach. Is we know we see the news and we see like a lot of times the breaches or exploits are. It's usually something that's just foundational that was missed. It's
Right.
rare that it's something that's some very new tool or technique or exploit. It's often just something basic was overlooked. So I think that this could be a good opportunity to get back to the basics and make sure that those foundational controls or KSIs are implemented just to shore things up.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that if you really look back at it, the majority of attacks are because of fundamentals
Hmm.
or a vulnerability that's been out there for way too long, right?
Hmm.
And there's known exploits on it. So
Yep.
if you can eliminate those big things there, and then put all the other controls or KSIs in place,
Hmm.
you'll be a lot further down the path than
Yeah.
anybody else. So,
Yep. Absolutely.
but all right, let me switch it again for you, and I'm going to ask you a couple questions here, and you let me
Okay.
know what you think here. Let me know like one of your favorite books as well. Yeah, let me.
Yeah. So I have three young kids, so I don't do as much reading for fun as maybe I used to. But one book I really enjoyed that I read within the last year or so was How Music Got Free, and it was all about music piracy. And actually,
Wow.
I was thinking about it before this podcast because there's actually part of the story takes place in North Carolina in Kings Mountain,
Oh yeah,
um, which I don't think is too far from you all. And there was
about
they had
90
a
miles
plant.
south of us. So
Yep, they had a plant there where they were producing CDs, and it was funny. I was thinking back to it, and it's interesting to kind of almost compare that to think about that in the context of 20X because the way the story goes is that somebody who worked at the plant was stealing CDs and then kind of sneaking them out and then leaking them to the internet. And just I was thinking back to all the ways they were trying to stop this individual. So they were, for example, they would you would have to go through the security checkpoint, and if it was green, you could go through. If it was red, you would be they would take a wand and check you for your CD. So it was just like a sampling, and then the other thing they were doing is a lot of the folks that worked there had these big belt buckles, metallic belt buckles,
right.
and they found that that was very common. So if you were to hide the CD in the belt buckle, and
Wow.
the one would go off, they would just let you right through. So
Right.
uh, it's funny. I was kind of thinking about it and thinking of in terms of 20X. And this is what I do for fun is
Yeah.
compare things like that. But it was a really interesting book, and it did have some interesting stories of kind of about people bypassing security controls.
Right, right. Well, I tell you, and you know this to be true. If you have a determined adversary,
Hmm.
there's always the ability to break in. So, but what you
Yeah,
need to be able to have is that security operations center who can detect it and respond to it as quickly as possible. So, what's the
yeah.
response? Which that's what the whole cybersecurity framework was developed for. Is
Hmm.
think about they're already in. What are you going to do, and how are you going to approach the hackers already being in there? How are you going to
Yeah,
recover? You know,
yeah,
so, which to me was a acknowledgement of where we're at in this world today,
yeah.
right? So,
Yeah, and I think you'll appreciate this too. So the part of the issue was that they would produce more CDs than needed. They wanted to have some backups in case something
yep.
went wrong. So they had these stacks of extra CDs, and those extras were not barcoded. So then I got thinking about kind of
Oh,
where
there you
you
go.
control. So
Inventory.
you do. This is what I was thinking about earlier today. So Yeah, they were saying, oh, they noticed that, when they would take them out to the shredder to destroy the extras, the shredder had no memory, and the shredder wouldn't know if only 20, if there were
Exactly.
24 extras and 23 got shredded. The
It's
shredder would
amazing
have
how
no idea.
far that goes, right? How far you can
Yeah,
take that. So
so that
that's
that was
crazy.
my analogy I was going to share. But yeah,
No,
it's
that's
it's a good
awesome.
book. If you're interested, it's a good book.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely. It sounds interesting for sure.
Yeah.
Um, how about tell me your favorite TV show or movie that you have as of right now?
I would say my favorite show probably of all time is The Simpsons. I think that's just something I don't really watch the, the newer ones necessarily, but it's something that I've recognized as an adult that, it's something I grew up watching and, kind of getting a kick out of Bart and the kids. And now as an adult, I'm seeing what, it's like, it's just, it's cool that you can go back and watch those episodes and kind of see it as an adult or as a parent, how you look at something totally different. So I guess that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Well, I remember when they first came out on the Tracy Ullman show,
Mhm.
and they were just yeah, that was it was probably. I mean, Tracy Ullman was very funny, and
Mhm.
but when The Simpsons came on, we all were like, "Oh, this is really cool. It's different. It's cartoons for adults."
Yep, exactly.
I can't remember when that was. It had to be in the '80s sometime. I can't remember exactly when it
Yeah, I think it
was.
must have been like maybe late '80s, but
Yeah, it was.
that's something I've enjoyed my whole life.
Yeah, no, they're definitely pretty cool. Definitely pretty
Mhm.
cool. So, and I guess it's also funny how they always predicting the future. I guess because I guess if you
Mhm.
make
Oh, I
that many
know.
shows, if you
I
make that
know.
many shows for that long of time, you're eventually gonna predict something,
Exactly.
right?
Yep,
So,
exactly.
so talk to me about something you did say in the last say quarter or this year, that had an impact on others as well. We're big on service here at Infusion Points, and I like to ask that question as well. Throw people for a loop. What do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So at Schellman, we have a advocacy group that we started called Schellman Spirit, which stands for Schellman Partnership in Reducing Risk in Information Technology. So
Oh,
there's an acronym for you,
there you
but
go.
that's something that I helped start a couple years back, and I love it because part of what we do is we try to find opportunities to give back. So Shellman does other things outside of that. Where we have a day of giving, where we get out in the community. So the most recent one, we went out to the local Boys and Girls Club and just did some painting and landscaping, and so that was something we did last year. But one thing we've been doing this year with Shellman Spirit is we've partnered with Black Girls Hack. Somebody
Right.
who's worked at Shellman now is on the leadership team over there, and we've been doing this. It's called Bring a Hacker to Work Day series, which is really cool. So people from Shellman have been kind of joining these sort of informal webinars and kind of sharing some of their story of what their role is, how they got there in their career for people that are trying to break into cybersecurity or maybe they're just looking to move to a different part of cybersecurity.
Right.
So those have been really good and we've gotten some really good feedback on those. So I'm excited about that.
Well, cool, cool. I tell you what, I really appreciate your time. It's been a great conversation. I hope the audience has learned a thing or two. That know that auditors actually are approachable, and you can talk to them and have good,
Yeah,
great conversations and laugh and joke around as well. Great conversation, and I hope everybody enjoys it. As always, you may not find me here hosting the podcast, but you can always find somebody behind the shield to help us through this tough area of cybersecurity and compliance. Appreciate your time. Thanks, Christian.
yep. Thank you for having me.